the background context of the global challenge to carbon neutrality, first of all, and you highlighted the major policy directions of China and Japan. And you also hinted to us what are the challenges and prospects, and especially in the ongoing geopolitical situations. Thanks for all the enriching information. Now we turn to the second speaker, Dr. Floriano Filho. Now the floor is yours.
Sure. Can you hear me well? Yes. Okay. 日本にいますから、皆さんこんにちは。Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, first of all, to Okada Sensei for the invitation. I do realize this opportunity relates to my visiting research here, which is on the screen right now. If you read that QR code, you're going to find online the website I made for this research visit, and I'm putting everything together there for the sake of transparency, and all the information I think will be useful for the future. I would also like to really thank Professor Tomo Marukawa, who is here, coming from Tokyo, Professor Masukata, who came also from Tokyo. Really appreciate your presences, and also the rest of you. Thank you so much for being here today. I think this what I'm going to talk about today relates well to what Dr. Chang was just telling us in terms of the several initiatives to decarbonize the world. However, in my view, in partially agreeing with her, I'm kind of pessimistic about this, because as we've seen in the last years, instead of decreasing the consumption of oil and coal and other fossil fuels are increasing in the world. So instead of decarbonizing, what I'm afraid we're seeing is carbonizing taking place. But I circulated the book chapter I'm writing for hopefully publishing this book sometime in the future. I'm not going to make any promises now, because I know this is a very hard work, and I do realize that it's a lot of information, and China is all over the place. Dr. Cheng just mentioned China many times there, and China is also very strong now in Latin America and other parts of the world, as we know. So in this chapter I share with you, I started by pointing out that the energy transition is complex and challenging, as Dr. Cheng just clearly showed to us. And I'm focusing more on critical minerals. I spent a good part of the article talking about rare earth elements and lithium, but also other critical minerals, which are very important for, well, every country in the world, but particularly certain countries. We're fighting for more space in this race, and we're going to see that China has already positioned itself in a very special place. And so China dominates the mining, processing, and supply chains of several critical minerals, important for many sectors, be them civil or military. And of course, this engagement with Latin America is very important, because Latin America has the largest amount of lithium in the world. But when we talk so much about energy transition, and everyone is talking about this, and we had a recent a recent conference in Kyoto, and people were talking about, one of the persons there was talking about, instead of a transition, a coexistence between fossil fuels and new forms of energy, and I think that's more rational to think about than the replacement of fossil fuels. I personally, I don't see that happening. In fact, as you can see there on the slide, the primary energy consumption increased 2% in 2023, and most of that came from fossil fuels, which still dominate more than 80% of total energy sources in the world. Even though the renewables increased to 14.6% of total energy consumption, the fact is that fossils dominate very much the scene. Critical minerals, they are essential for batteries, solar panels, wind turbines, and electric vehicles. So when Dr. Chang was talking to us about decarbonization using these new technologies, it is basically impossible to think about these new technologies without talking about critical minerals. Without them, you cannot make this new technologies as simple as that. And the demand because of that, because people are trying to push for this energy transition with clean technologies, the demand is projected to surge by over 500% by 2050. This is a figure by the World Bank, if I'm not wrong, but all of this is referenced in the book chapter I circulated, so you can easily find the sources there. So in the last line, I list some of the important critical minerals, but there are many others. There you can see a comparison. On the right hand side, you have oil, petroleum, and then natural gas in terms of, value, money value. And then in the third place, copper, of which the exports of which Latin America is also very important because of Chile and Peru mainly. And then, much smaller than those, you have the critical minerals shown there. So there you can see more or less a proportion of what we are talking here, and how it's very, very hard to think about a world without fossil fuels. Now, then I go on to discuss in this chapter a little bit about the BRICS role, given the fact that we are really seeing now the world getting into a more complicated position, and I think unfortunately it's going to get even worse when Trump takes office next month, because he has already announced that he is going to impose new tariffs and is going to make this trade war with China even worse. And at the same time, we are seeing the world going in a way, in many cases, that looks like we're walking towards some kind of rupture. I'm not sure if it would be maybe not a total rupture, but we are, I think, walking towards more conflicts in the world of different kinds. And critical minerals are an important part of that, because the US, for example, is not satisfied at all with the current situation. They realize that this is a national security issue, and they are already treating this subject as a national security subject. So why is the BRICS countries, as you know, started as Brazil, Russia, India, China, and then South Africa came in, and then other countries recently joined, like Iran and a few other countries. They together hold those percentages of critical minerals that you can see there on the screen. And besides that, Latin America holds about almost half of the world's copper. Copper is not considered a mineral critical, but it's fundamental for energy, electricity transmission. So without copper, you don't have, a transition happening. And the global production of critical minerals is pretty much dominated by China. Other key producers include Australia, Chile, especially in the case of lithium, and copper as well, and Congo for cobalt. And there you see a list of minerals produced in the world, and the big circle there is China. And then clearly you see the importance of China to the production of critical minerals and other minerals in the world. This is taken from a Swedish source. But then when you talk about production, you have to separate between mining and refining. We're going to see a graph afterwards telling us more about this difference. And China is important on both. More refining than mining, but it's still important in mining as well. So, as I was saying before, because of this position, especially by China, the BRICS nations expanding influence through control of critical resources tends to be more and more important as those countries develop in these areas. And this may cause more disruption in the existing supply chains. We are already seeing that happening, and this might intensify. We are also seeing the increasing use of sanctions and tariffs affecting mineral trade. This is happening already from different sides. From the US, from China, other countries as well. So what we are witnessing in the world is really some ideological shoring, what I would call ideological shoring, instead of just friend shoring. I would prefer the term ally shoring, because we see a lot of ideologies pushing for common groups to come together and establish connections among them. So this is not necessarily relating to specific countries, because countries like the United States or Brazil, where you have a big polarization, political polarization, ideological polarization, it's not that the entire country wants to do the same, but you see groups within countries getting together. So, for example, Xi Jinping, the president of China, was just 3 weeks ago in Brazil for G20, and then he traveled to Brasilia, where I live, to meet Lula and sign a number of MOUs, establishing new alliances, and they have an ideological, common ground that allows them to move forward in those agreements. So from the US point of view, and why I'm referring to the US here, because besides the US-China tensions that we've been seeing for around a decade now, of course the US is still the major military power in the world, and of course the critical minerals, as I said, they can also be used for military purposes. So that's why the US has not only considered this issue a national security issue, but also has established different programs and push for different institutions to look closely at this situation, including in the military area, in the intelligence area, in the legislative area, besides the executive in the United States. So this is one of the graphs that show us the importance of critical minerals for both the US and China, and how they rely on those minerals. Interestingly enough, as I come from Brazil, you see niobium. We're not going to study the periodic table here today, but you see niobium at the extreme top right there, and Brazil holds like 95% of the world's niobium. And that's very important for different applications, also in the military, but in batteries as well. Toshiba, the Japanese Toshiba company, is doing research in Brazil in that area. They developed a new battery with niobium already, and you see, for example, rare earth elements. It's very important for the United States. They're on the left. And other, later you can take a look closely at this. It's interesting, and because of that, those reliances, of course, as time goes by and new developments happen, then you have certain minerals which are considered critical for countries around the world, and this is the US perspective for the short and medium terms. So as I mentioned already, China has that amount of control on critical minerals, 60% of production, including mining and processing. If you take only processing, then it's going to be 85%, which is incredible, really. And the dominance happens in many different kinds across the global value chain. As you can see there, this was taken from the International Energy Agency. They have been publishing more and more materials about this, given its importance. So this is again showing some figures of China controlling the value chain. I'm not going to go through all the statistics. They are all in the book chapter. You can take a look at them carefully afterwards. And it's not that China is only important for production, mining, and processing. It's also central in the trade of critical minerals and processed minerals in the world. And there you have a list of the flows of the networks, and China PRC is in the center of all of this for all the important minerals you can think of. So, of course, this so evident dominance, of course, brings a number of challenges, which are economic, geopolitical, market, environmental challenges, and I mean, I believe we don't need to be discussing this so much, because it's obvious that when you concentrate this market globally in terms of such important products in that way, of course, you're going to have disruptions, you're going to have unequal treatments, you're going to have threats, and you're going to have the use of these materials for political uses, and that's happening already. It's not a supposition, it's not theoretical. It has happened, and it continues to happen. So China's engagement with Latin America has been growing for many years already. It's nothing new. but it's getting more and more momentum, and I think a recent event illustrates this very well, which was the inauguration of the Chancay port in Peru, which is a mega construction, part of the BRI, with Dr. Chang also referred there. And I suppose in the next 10 years or more, this is gonna completely change the relationship between Asia and Latin America. But besides Shanghai, which is just one of the example of many, China has been doing many significant investments in mining and infrastructure. Part of them related to the BRI, but part of them not. For example, Brazil is not part of the BRI. Nevertheless, is the country which receives most investments of China in Latin America. I think I don't need to go on very much on the lithium triangle at this point. I suppose everyone already knows about this, the ABC, Argentina, Bolivia, Chile region, where you have the largest reserves of lithium in the world, and that's of course has been one of the attractions for China in that region, and they have been involved in a series of mergers and acquisitions, not only in the region, throughout the world, but in the region there are many. You have a list there, you can go through this later, and there you see not only Latin America, but you see many other countries in the world. So that's the Chancay port I told you about. It's a big investment by COSCO, a state-owned Chinese company in the transportation business, and that figure, that map is really amazing for me, because when you think about the ports in red and the China satellite ground stations in white with blue letters, you see how the Chinese were able to set up a very extensive and comprehensive system in the region, something that the United States in maybe more than 500 years was not able to do. And China did this in a little bit more than a decade. And that for me is amazing, and that shows to me how serious they are about this compromise with the region. So as we can imagine, this has serious implications also for global supply chains. They are not kidding. They are playing really a serious game here, and that's why they were able to control this sector. And this could potentially disrupt the Western supply chain, or as some people call it, the Western world, and representing a geopolitical shift in South America as well. Dr. Chang talked about the MSP, the minerals. No, I'm sorry. She talked about the IRA. The U.S. presented other initiatives. The MSP is one of them, launched in 2022, aiming to create alternative supply chains and balance the security with environmental and social areas. Dr. Chang showed us a little about the IRA, but in fact, instead of decarbonizing, I'm afraid it's going to mean, in a sense, carbonize the system, because to produce critical minerals, you have to use fossil fuels. Unfortunately, there is no way out of this. So, and that's the expected growth and critical minerals with the IRA. This is based on Standard & Poor's data. Going to the final words here, future outlook, just a few points. The ongoing competition for control over critical mineral resources should increase in the future. Also, the scrutiny of Chinese investments globally. Well, this is already happening. As I just told you, the U.S. is not only the U.S. but the Europeans also. They're setting up a big number of programs to try to catch up, because the word is catch up, because China is so far ahead that they have to try to catch up in this game. The acceleration of research into alternative materials and recycling technologies also should increase, as Dr. Chang already told us. The far-reaching implications of China's dominance, as I just said, I think that map that I just showed you, I think illustrates that. Should be even more evident. Latin America, in due time, should play a crucial role in the global critical minerals landscape. It already plays, but because of this race, this should increase. And there should be a balancing economic benefits with strategic considerations, or rather, in other words, to balance economic benefits with strategic considerations remains a challenge. Of course, we're using diplomatic language here to say this is going to be very tough. It's very tough because, as I just said, the race has started years ago and other countries didn't follow through. Now they have to try to catch up. Thank you very much.